The stars looked peaceful from the observation deck of the small station orbiting New Haven, and Jake Harrison stood there watching them like he did every morning before his shift began. He was the commander of this orbital defense station, though that title meant little when defending a farming colony that had never seen trouble in its 15 years of existence. The coffee in his hand was still hot, the earth-grown beans a luxury his wife sent him every month, and he thought about calling her before work started, but decided against it because she would still be sleeping back home on Luna. The alarm changed everything in 1 second. Red lights flooded the observation deck, and the peaceful stars were suddenly filled with ships that should not have been there. Dozens of them, massive and dark and wrong in a way that made Jake's heart race even before he understood what he was seeing. He dropped his coffee and ran to the command center where his small crew of 8 was already scrambling to their stations, their faces showing the same confusion and fear that he felt building in his chest. The ships were Krathian. He realized when the computer finally identified them, and that made no sense at all because the Krathian Empire was 6 systems away, and humanity had no conflict with them, beyond occasional trade disagreements that diplomats handled with boring efficiency. He opened all communication channels and broadcast a simple message asking what they wanted and whether New Haven could help them, his voice steady despite the trembling in his hands. The response came not in words but in action, and Jake watched his screens light up with weapons fire that streaked down toward the planet below like falling stars made of death. The cities died first. Jake saw the thermal blooms on his monitors as plasma weapons hit population centers, each flash representing thousands of lives ending in fire and light. He sent emergency broadcasts to Earth, to the other colonies, to anyone who might hear, his voice breaking as he described what he was watching. His crew tried to activate the station's defensive weapons, old railguns designed to stop asteroids and debris. But Krathian ships moved with precision that made human defenses look like children's toys. They knew exactly where to shoot and what to destroy, and Jake realized with cold horror that they had planned this attack down to the smallest detail. The civilian transport ships tried to evacuate people from the burning cities, and Jake watched them die too. The Krathians targeted them deliberately, shooting down vessels full of families and children and the communications channels filled with screaming that would haunt Jake for whatever time he had left. He recorded everything, every sensor reading, every camera feed, every moment of the massacre, because some part of his military training told him this evidence mattered, even though he could not imagine how anything mattered anymore. His station shook when the Krathian weapons hit, and Jake knew they were coming for him next. He gathered his crew in the command center and told them they would die soon, but their last act would be to send all the recorded data to Earth in a compressed burst transmission. They worked together in silence, fingers flying over controls, making sure every piece of evidence was packaged and ready. The station had 6 escape pods, but Jake had seen what the Krathians did to fleeing ships, and he would not give them the satisfaction of hunting his people for sport. The transmission launched just as the first Krathian boarding team breached the station's hull, and Jake felt satisfaction even as fear gripped his throat. He pulled up one final camera feed, the one showing Krathian soldiers laughing as they fired on running children in the streets of New Haven's capital, and he added it to the transmission with shaking hands. Let Earth see this, he thought. Let them see what we died for and what these creatures really are. The last thing Jake Harrison saw was the command center door exploding inward and Krathian soldiers in their dark armor stepping through the smoke. The last thing he heard was his communication officer whispering that the transmission had reached Earth. Then there was light and heat and nothing at all. 3 hours later, Admiral Christine Wade sat in her office in Geneva and watched Jake Harrison's final transmission. She had seen death before, had commanded ships in battle against pirates and raiders, but nothing had prepared her for this systematic slaughter of innocents. The footage showed children burning, showed families torn apart, showed laughing aliens treating murder like entertainment. Her hands gripped the edge of her desk hard enough to hurt, and something cold and final settled in her chest. General Raymond Carter entered without knocking, his face gray and hard, and together they watched the footage again in silence. When it ended, Christine looked at him and saw the same conclusion in his eyes that she felt in her bones. They had spent 43 years playing the peaceful newcomer, smiling at the Council, keeping humanity's true capabilities hidden while they learned about the galaxy and its threats. The Krathians had mistaken that patience for weakness, had seen restraint and believed it was fear. Christine opened the secure channel to Earth's hidden military facilities, the ones that existed in classified files and nowhere else, and spoke 3 words into the microphone. Protocol Black Dawn. Around the planet, in facilities buried beneath mountains and hidden in asteroid bases, those words triggered responses that had been prepared since the day humanity first met aliens, and realized the galaxy was not the peaceful place they had hoped for. Doors opened on ships that did not exist in any public record, and soldiers who had trained in secret for decades received orders they had always known might come. She made one call to the civilian government, to the president who had always known this day might arrive, and received authorization in 30 seconds. Then she made a broadcast to Earth that went to every network, every device, every human who could hear her voice. She told them about New Haven, about the massacre, about the 2,300,000 dead. She told them the time for pretending was over and the time for truth had come. Humanity would respond to this attack not with diplomacy or sanctions or angry speeches, but with war. Total and complete war, and the Krathians would learn what humans really were beneath their civilized masks. The response from Earth's population was not panic or fear, but something darker and more determined. A collective rage that burned cold and patient. They had ancestors who survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions, who had climbed to the top of a death world's food chain through sheer bloody-minded refusal to quit. That ancient human fury woke up now, and it wore a uniform and carried weapons designed by engineers, who had spent decades planning for this exact scenario. Captain Daniel Cross received his orders in a bunker beneath the Pacific where his ship had waited in silence for 17 years, and he read them without surprise. Take command of the Retribution, proceed to New Haven. Destroy all Krathian forces. No prisoners unless they have intelligence value. No mercy, no hesitation. He acknowledged the orders and walked to his ship through corridors that smelled of recycled air and determination, past crew members who had trained their entire careers for a war that might never come. Now it had come, and they were ready. Lieutenant Kate Morrison stood in her apartment and watched the footage of New Haven burning, and she saw her sister's face in every victim, because her sister lived there, had lived there, was ash now like everyone else. She enlisted in the Reaper Corps within an hour, passing the physical and psychological tests with scores that made the recruiters exchange worried glances. They asked her why she wanted to fight, and she told them the truth that she wanted to look into Krathian eyes when they realized what they had awakened. They accepted her immediately. The galaxy would call what followed many things, but humans had only one name for it: payback. High Commander Vrek stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the recordings of New Haven's destruction with satisfaction that showed in the pleased rumbling of his throat. The humans had died exactly as he predicted, running and screaming and begging like all weak species did when faced with superior force. His intelligence officers had told him humanity possessed only defensive vessels and diplomatic tendencies, and the massacre had proven them correct. 2 million humans dead in 6 hours, and not one had fought back with anything resembling military competence. He drafted a message to Earth demanding their surrender within 10 days and threatening to destroy another colony world for each day they delayed. His staff assured him the humans would capitulate within 3 days at most, that no species could watch their civilians burn and choose continued resistance. Vrek sent the message with confidence built on 40 conquests, certain that humanity would be his easiest victory yet. He ordered his fleet to gather at New Haven and prepare for the next assault, and his soldiers celebrated with drinks and tales of the killing they had done. The Krathian fleet numbered 200 warships, each one a veteran of multiple campaigns, each crew confident in their superiority over these soft humans who built farms instead of weapons. They treated the gathering as a festival, broadcasting their celebrations across the Empire, showing subject species what happened to those who existed in Krathian space without permission. The parties lasted 3 days before the sensor officer on Rek's flagship noticed something strange at the edge of the system. Energy signatures that should not exist. Ships arriving from hyperspace in numbers that made no sense. Rek looked at the tactical display and felt confusion rather than fear, because the ships appearing on his screens matched no human designs in the Krathian database. They were larger than expected, more numerous than intelligence had suggested possible, and they moved with military precision that defensive fleets should not possess. He ordered his fleet to battle stations and opened communication channels to demand identification, but the human ships responded with silence that was somehow more threatening than any words could have been. Captain Daniel Cross sat in the command chair of the Retribution and looked at the Krathian fleet spread before him like targets in a shooting range. His bridge crew worked in quiet efficiency, calling out ranges and firing solutions, preparing weapons that had never been fired in anger, but had been tested 10,000 times in simulation. He thought about the footage from New Haven, about the laughing soldiers and the burning children, and he felt nothing but cold calculation as he gave the order to attack. "Open fire," he said, and his voice carried no anger or hatred, just the flat certainty of someone doing necessary work. The Retribution's main cannon fired first, a weapon that drew power from a miniature reactor and accelerated a projectile to speeds that turned physics into devastation. The shot crossed the distance between fleets in 3 seconds and hit Rex's flagship directly through the bow, punching through shields that were supposed to be state-of-the-art, and continuing through 6 decks of armor and crew compartments before exiting through the engine section. The flagship broke apart in a bloom of fire and debris, killing Vrek and 3,000 crew before they even understood they were under attack. The rest of the human fleet opened fire in the same second, and the battle became an execution. Railguns firing uranium-tipped rounds shredded Krathian armor like paper, each impact delivering kinetic energy that no shield in the galaxy could absorb. Missile swarms launched from human carriers, thousands of AI-guided weapons that dodged and weaved around Krathian point defense, and struck with precision that left crews wondering how humans had developed such technology in secret. Laser batteries carved through hulls with surgical accuracy, targeting power plants and weapon systems, leaving Krathian ships crippled and helpless. The Krathian fleet tried to respond with their plasma weapons and fusion missiles, tried to use tactics that had worked against 47 other species, but human ships moved faster and hit harder than anything they had encountered. Human point defense shot down incoming fire with efficiency that seemed impossible, while human armor absorbed hits that should have been fatal and kept fighting. Krathian commanders screamed orders to their crews, trying to organize a response, but human electronic warfare blinded their sensors and jammed their communications, leaving each ship to die alone and confused. Some Krathian ships tried to flee, their captains recognizing a losing battle and choosing survival over honor. Human fighters pursued them, small craft piloted by veterans who had hidden their skills behind defensive patrol routes for decades. They hunted the fleeing Krathians through the asteroid field at the system's edge, through the gas giants' rings, through every hiding place the terrified aliens sought. The fighters moved like extensions of their pilots' thoughts, rolling and diving and firing with accuracy that spoke of thousands of hours of training that no one in the galaxy had known about. Lieutenant Kate Morrison flew one of those fighters, and she felt nothing but focus as she tracked a fleeing Krathian destroyer. Her targeting computer locked on and she fired, watching her missiles streak across the dark and slam into the destroyer's engines. The ship tumbled out of control, life support failing, crew dying from explosive decompression. She thought about her sister, about all the families on New Haven who had died while trying to flee, and she felt the universe had achieved a small balance in this moment. The battle lasted 47 minutes from first shot to last, and when it ended, the Krathian fleet had ceased to exist. 200 warships reduced to debris and radiation. 60,000 Krathian soldiers and crew turned into corpses floating in the dark. The human fleet had not lost a single vessel, had suffered only minor damage to 3 destroyers that would be repaired within a week. Captain Daniel Cross looked at the tactical display showing nothing but wreckage and friendly contacts, and he ordered his communications officer to broadcast a message on all Krathian frequencies. Admiral Christine Wade's face appeared on every screen in Krathian space, and her voice carried the same cold calm that Cross had used when ordering the attack. She spoke to the Krathian people, to their government, to every alien who had cheered the massacre of New Haven. "You wanted our attention," she said, and her eyes showed no anger or satisfaction, just the patient gaze of someone explaining simple facts. "You have it now," she continued, "and we are coming for you, coming for all of you, and there is nowhere in this galaxy you can hide from what you have unleashed." The broadcast ended, and Krathian space fell silent with a fear they had never known before. News of the battle spread through the galaxy at light speed, carried by traders and diplomats and intelligence services, that could not believe what they were hearing. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session, and Ambassador Kevin Price sat in his chair while alien diplomats shouted questions and demands. They wanted to know where humanity had hidden this fleet, wanted to know what other secrets Earth kept, wanted to know if they were safe from human aggression. Kevin Price let them shout until they exhausted themselves, and then he stood and spoke with a voice that carried across the chamber. Humanity had come to the galaxy in peace, he said. But we were never helpless, never weak, never the simple farmers you thought we were. We built our strength in silence while we learned about you. Learned which species could be trusted and which saw kindness as vulnerability. The Krathians made their choice, he continued. And now they will face the consequences of mistaking our civilization for cowardice. The council chair demanded to know if humanity planned to attack other species, and Kevin Price smiled without warmth. We attack those who attack us, he said simply. We will end this war we did not start, and any species that interferes will be considered an enemy. The age of humanity pretending to be weak to make you comfortable is over. Deal with it. He walked out of the chamber while aliens whispered in fear and confusion. Earth withdrew from the Galactic Council that day, and the vote was unanimous among humans. They had tried diplomacy and it had bought them nothing but dead colonists. Now they would try something else, something humans had always been better at than talking. War. The Krathian Empire had stood for 300 years, built on the bones of 47 conquered species, and maintained through military force that had never failed. Supreme Archon Threk sat in his throne room on the homeworld of Kratha and watched reports of the New Haven battle with disbelief that slowly turned to rage. His generals assured him the footage was falsified, that humans could not possibly possess such weapons, that their intelligence networks must have been compromised. Threk wanted to believe them, but the evidence was clear in ways that made his blood run cold with something he had not felt since childhood, the sharp taste of genuine fear. He ordered every available ship to Kratha for defense and sent commands to his outer systems to prepare for human attack. His intelligence services worked around the clock to find humanity's secrets, to understand how they had built this fleet and hidden it from galactic observation. What they discovered was worse than any single fleet, worse than any weapon system. Humanity had been lying since first contact, presenting a peaceful face while conducting the most comprehensive intelligence operation in galactic history. Every human diplomat had been a spy, every trade mission a reconnaissance operation, every cultural exchange a chance to map Krathian military capabilities. The humans had known where every Krathian shipyard was located, where every weapons factory operated, where every military base trained soldiers. They had inserted spy satellites in Krathian systems years ago, tiny devices that looked like space debris but recorded everything. They had recruited agents from subject species who hated their Krathian masters and fed information to Earth. The peaceful facade had been an intelligence-gathering operation that took decades, and now humanity was ready to use everything they had learned. Captain Daniel Cross led the first strike into Krathian space, taking his fleet through hyperspace routes that should have been secret, but which human intelligence had mapped with perfect accuracy. They emerged at Kratha Prime, the Empire's main shipyard, and attacked before the Krathians even knew they had arrived. The shipyards had been building ships for 2 centuries, massive facilities that could produce 50 warships per year, and they died in fire and explosions that lit up the night sky on 3 nearby worlds. 2 million Krathian workers and soldiers died in the first 30 minutes, and Cross felt nothing but satisfaction as he watched the strategic target eliminated with brutal efficiency. General Raymond Carter directed the overall campaign from Earth with the cold precision of someone who had studied warfare his entire life. His strategy was simple and terrible in its completeness. Target every military asset in Krathian space and destroy them all. Leave the Empire unable to wage war for generations. He called it Scorched Heavens, and the name was earned in the flames of burning installations across 24 systems. Human fleets struck shipyards, weapons factories, training centers, ammunition depots, research stations, anything that contributed to Krathian military power. Lieutenant Kate Morrison and the Reaper Corps landed on Krathian-held worlds to free enslaved populations and eliminate military outposts. She led a strike team to Krath 7, a prison world where 50,000 aliens from 40 different species lived in brutal captivity. The Krathian guards fought hard, their training and courage evident even to Kate as she killed them with mechanical efficiency. They died defending a system they believed in, and she could respect that even as she put rounds through their armor and watched them fall. The prisoners they freed told stories of torture and forced labor, of families separated and children taken for brainwashing into Krathian service. Kate listened to each story and documented every crime, knowing these testimonies would matter when the war ended. She found humans among the prisoners, survivors from New Haven who had been kept alive for slavery rather than killed with the others. They looked at her with hollow eyes that had seen too much, and she promised them the Krathians would pay for every moment of suffering. She kept that promise in blood and fire across 6 more worlds. Paul Henderson led colonial militia forces in guerrilla operations behind Krathian lines, using tactics humanity had refined over thousands of years of insurgent warfare. His people struck supply convoys and communication stations, disappeared into civilian populations, planted explosives in infrastructure that the Krathians thought was secure. The Krathians had never faced an enemy who fought this way, who used deception and patience as weapons, who sacrificed individuals to protect the group. Their military doctrine had no answers for opponents who refused to fight fair. Admiral Christine Wade introduced psychological warfare that broke Krathian morale as effectively as weapons broke their ships. After each battle, human forces broadcast footage of the destruction on all Krathian frequencies, but the broadcasts contained no gloating or anger. Human voices calmly listed casualties and damages like reading weather reports, treating the annihilation of Krathian forces as simple data collection. The message was clear and terrifying in its implications. This was not personal for humans, not revenge or hatred, just a problem being solved with cold efficiency. Earth's propaganda division broadcast messages across Krathian space, showing their own leaders fleeing while demanding soldiers fight and die. They exposed corruption in the ruling families, showed how the wealthy sent their children to safety while conscripting the poor. The Krathian military culture was built on honor and strength, but when faced with evidence that their leaders possessed neither, that foundation began to crack. Mutinies erupted on 6 worlds, not because soldiers wanted to join humanity, but because they refused to die for hypocrites. 8 months after New Haven's destruction, human forces converged on Kratha itself. Supreme Archon Threk commanded the defense personally, leading 400 ships against the 150 vessels in Captain Daniel Cross's fleet. Threk was a veteran warrior who had conquered systems and broken empires, and he believed his experience would overcome human technology. He was wrong in ways that became obvious within the first hour of battle. The Battle of Kratha began at dawn and ended at sunset, 12 hours of fighting that destroyed the last major Krathian fleet. Threk's ships fought with desperate courage, damaging 12 human vessels and destroying 2. But the outcome was never in doubt. Human weapons technology was a generation ahead of Krathian arms, human tactics refined through simulations that had modeled this exact battle. By evening, Threk's flagship drifted in orbit. Engines dead, life support failing, 4,000 crew reduced to 200 survivors. Human boarding teams found Threk still alive, both legs severed by shrapnel but conscious despite the pain. They brought him to the Retribution's bridge where Captain Daniel Cross looked at the alien warlord with eyes that held no triumph or satisfaction. Cross asked him a simple question. "Do you understand now what you awakened?" Threk rasped that humans were monsters, and Cross shook his head slowly. "No," Cross said quietly. "We are humans, and you should have left us alone. You mistook our peace for weakness, our civilization for cowardice. And now your empire burns because you could not imagine a species that chose restraint over aggression, until given no choice." Admiral Christine Wade arrived at Kratha the next day and broadcast surrender terms to the planet below. The Krathian civilian government had 1 hour to respond or face orbital bombardment of military targets. She gave them this choice knowing they would take it, knowing that even genocidal empires contained civilians who just wanted to survive. The surrender came in 30 minutes, unconditional and complete, and Wade landed with occupation forces to oversee the empire's dissolution. The terms were harsh but not cruel, because humanity had learned something the Krathians never understood. That true victory meant ensuring enemies could not fight again without destroying them completely. The Krathian Empire was dissolved, its territory divided among the species they had enslaved. Weapons production was forbidden for 50 years, the shipyards dismantled, the factories retooled for civilian use. War crimes trials would be held for those responsible for New Haven and other massacres. Reparations would be paid to every species that had suffered under Krathian rule. Lieutenant Kate Morrison stood guard while human engineers dismantled the last weapons factory, and she watched Krathian workers leave the facility jobless but alive. Children played in the streets below, unaware their empire had ended, and Kate felt hollow watching them. The vengeance she had sought since her sister's death had been achieved. The Krathians had paid for their crimes in full. But her sister was still dead, and nothing would bring her back. Victory tasted like ash in her mouth, and she wondered if peace would feel like anything at all after so much war. The Krathian Empire that had conquered 47 systems and terrorized entire sectors for 3 centuries died in less than a year, dismantled by humans who fought with the efficiency of machines and the determination of survivors. The galaxy watched in fear and awe, realizing that the peaceful species they had welcomed 43 years ago had been predators in disguise, patient and calculating and more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The age of human diplomacy was over, and the age of human dominance had begun whether anyone wanted it or not. The Vex sovereignty had dominated galactic politics for 2,000 years through careful diplomacy and the largest fleet in known space. Their military council convened 3 days after Kratha fell, and the chamber was silent as generals reviewed human battle recordings. The Vex had always believed themselves the galaxy's premier military power, but the data showed a truth that made their mandibles quiver with instinctive fear. The human fleet was smaller than theirs, but more advanced in every measurable way, and the simulations their best tactical computers ran all showed the same conclusion. The Vex fleet would last perhaps 3 months against Earth. Every major species conducted similar assessments with similar results, and fear rippled through the galaxy like a wave moving through water. Xenobiologists who had dismissed humanity as insignificant now scrambled to understand what had created such effective warriors. They studied Earth's history with growing horror, learning about 10,000 years of nearly continuous warfare, conflicts that killed tens of millions, weapons that could sterilize entire continents. They discovered that humans had evolved on a death world where almost everything was trying to kill them, from megafauna to microscopic diseases to each other. The aliens realized humans were not anomalously violent by Earth standards, but rather the survivors of one of the galaxy's harshest evolutionary crucibles. Every human alive descended from ancestors who had outcompeted saber-toothed predators and survived ice ages and built civilizations. Despite living on a planet that threw hurricanes and earthquakes and volcanic eruptions at them with regularity, humanity's capacity for violence was not an aberration, but a survival trait honed over millions of years. And the peaceful facade they had worn was just another survival strategy employed while they assessed galactic threats. Ambassador Kevin Price received 20 diplomatic delegations in a single week, all asking variations of the same question about Earth's intentions. The Thelron offered military alliance and access to their trade networks. The Vex offered economic partnership and council leadership. The minor species offered tribute and pledges of loyalty. All wanted assurance that humanity would not turn on them next, that the Krathian example was punishment for aggression rather than demonstration of imperial ambition. Price gave each delegation the same answer, delivered in calm tones that somehow made the message more threatening. Humanity wanted to be left alone, he said. We wanted that before Kratha, before New Haven, before any of this. You did not listen then, he continued, and his eyes held no warmth or forgiveness. Now you will listen, he finished, because you understand what happens to species that mistake our restraint for weakness. We will defend ourselves and our interests with whatever force proves necessary, and if that means the galaxy fears us, then perhaps fear will accomplish what diplomacy could not. On Earth, humanity grappled with what they had unleashed and what they had become. Admiral Christine Wade addressed Earth's parliament in a speech broadcast across all human space. She stood at the podium and explained that Protocol Black Dawn had been necessary, that the galaxy respected strength, not kindness, that humanity could never again afford to appear weak. The diplomatic mask had kept Earth safe while they learned about alien civilizations and their capabilities, she said. But that safety was always temporary, and built on deception that the Krathians had shattered with plasma fire and mass murder. The vote to maintain full military readiness passed with overwhelming support, but the celebrations that followed felt hollow to those who understood what had been lost. The peaceful exploration of space, the optimistic belief that civilization would triumph over barbarism, the hope that humanity had evolved beyond its violent past. All of that died on New Haven alongside 2 million colonists. Earth was now a military power first and explorers second. And that change was permanent whether anyone liked it or not. Captain Daniel Cross was hailed as a hero across human space, parades held in his honor, medals awarded by presidents and kings and corporate leaders. He attended each ceremony with a face that showed nothing, accepted each award with words of thanks that meant less than nothing, and felt like an executioner pretending to be a soldier. He had killed 60,000 Krathians at New Haven and hundreds of thousands more across their empire, and while he did not regret those deaths, he could not celebrate them either. War was sometimes necessary, but it was never glorious, and anyone who thought otherwise had never watched cities burn from orbit. He met with families of New Haven victims who thanked him for avenging their loved ones, and he accepted their gratitude while feeling nothing inside. Something fundamental had broken in him during the war, some capacity for normal emotion that everyone else seemed to possess. He requested reassignment to frontier patrol far from Earth and populated colonies, away from the parades and politicians and people who wanted to shake his hand. His request was approved, and he departed on the battleship Vengeance, with relief that felt like the only genuine emotion he had experienced in months. Lieutenant Kate Morrison returned to Earth on mandatory leave and found herself unable to connect with the civilian world. She visited her parents, who hugged her and asked careful questions about the war, and she gave them careful answers that revealed nothing about what she had seen and done. She spent hours looking at pictures of her sister, remembering a childhood that felt like it had happened to someone else in some other life. The Kate who had grown up planning to study alien biology had died on New Haven alongside her sister, and the Kate who returned was someone harder and colder and more broken than anyone should be. She met with other veterans who felt the same emptiness, warriors who had fought brilliantly and won decisively, and now could not remember how to be anything except soldiers. They formed support groups that met in quiet rooms and talked about nightmares and guilt, and the strange disconnection they felt from people who had not gone to war. Kate found some comfort in these meetings, some sense that she was not alone in feeling alone, but she did not know if she could stay on Earth. The peace felt alien to her now, and she missed the clarity of combat where objectives were clear and success was measurable. Paul Henderson returned to farming on a new colony world built with reparation funds from the Krathian government. He planted Earth crops during the day, worked until exhaustion claimed him, and had nightmares about battle every night. His wife Lisa had survived New Haven by hiding in a mining bunker with their children, and she held him when he woke screaming, told him the dreams would fade with time. Paul was not sure he wanted them to fade, because forgetting felt like betraying everyone who had died, like pretending the war had not mattered when it was the only thing that had ever mattered. The Galactic Council proposed a new charter that acknowledged reality in ways their old laws never had. Humanity was invited to return not as regular member, but as permanent observer with veto authority over any military action by Council species. The position was unprecedented in galactic history, essentially making Earth the supreme military power with authority to prevent conflicts before they started. Ambassador Kevin Price brought the offer to Earth's government, and the debate lasted 3 weeks. General Raymond Carter argued against acceptance with passion that surprised those who knew his usual calm demeanor. The Council would eventually conspire against humanity, he insisted. History showed that dominant powers always faced coalitions of lesser powers seeking to restore balance. Earth should remain independent and vigilant, he concluded. Trust no one and prepare for inevitable conflict. Admiral Christine Wade disagreed with equal passion, arguing that isolated humanity could be surprised by threats they did not see coming, that Council membership provided intelligence and early warning, that military strength alone could not achieve. The debate grew heated as politicians and military leaders chose sides, and Earth's President Helen Brooks finally made the decision that ended discussion. Accept the observer position, she ordered, but maintain complete military independence and continue intelligence operations. We will watch the Council, she said, and if they plot against us, we will know and respond. But we will not blind ourselves to galactic affairs out of pride or paranoia. Ambassador Kevin Price returned to the Council chamber and took the observer seat positioned above regular member stations. The alien representatives watched nervously as he delivered Earth's acceptance speech in words that promised protection and threatened destruction in the same breath. "We accept this role as duty, not honor," he said. "We will watch for threats to innocent species and respond with whatever force proves necessary. If that means the galaxy fears us," he continued, "then fear will keep the peace that diplomacy could not. Let this be the last warning anyone receives." Not everyone accepted Earth's dominance, and in the shadows of the galactic underworld, a coalition began forming. Species humiliated by human victory, criminal syndicates disrupted by new order, Krathian rebels who refused to accept defeat. They gathered under a banner calling themselves the Liberation Front. They claimed to fight against human imperialism, and their leader was known only as the Coordinator, a mysterious figure whose identity remained secret even from most front members. Earth's intelligence services detected Liberation Fur. 5 years passed and the galaxy settled into peace that felt less like harmony and more like mutual deterrence. Human military bases orbited strategic systems, their presence a constant reminder of what happened to species that threatened innocence. The bases were not occupations but guarantors of stability, and most species admitted privately that piracy and raiding had dropped 90% since Earth took responsibility for enforcing galactic order. Slavery, once common in certain sectors, had been virtually eliminated by human-led operations that freed millions and punished slavers with efficiency that bordered on ruthless. Admiral Christine Wade was 60 years old now. Gray-haired and tired but still commanding Earth's fleet with iron discipline, she had become the galaxy's military authority by default, consulted on disputes between species, feared by anyone considering aggression. She met regularly with alien commanders, teaching them human tactical doctrine, sharing some technologies while keeping others classified. Some species adopted human methods and built stronger fleets. Others developed countermeasures they hoped never to test. Wade encouraged both approaches because she believed lasting peace required mutual respect, built on mutual capability. Captain Daniel Cross, promoted to Commodore, commanded the frontier fleet from the battleship Vengeance. He patrolled the galactic rim where civilization ended and chaos began, responding to distress calls and hunting pirates and investigating threats that intelligence flagged as potentially dangerous. His reputation preceded him across 100 systems, and pirates often surrendered at the sight of his ship rather than face destruction. Would-be warlords reconsidered their ambitions when they learned Cross patrolled nearby space. He had become a symbol of human military might, a warrior who could never stop fighting because the galaxy still needed warriors. Lieutenant Kate Morrison, now Captain Morrison, led the Peacekeeping Corps, a joint human-alien military force dedicated to humanitarian operations. She commanded soldiers from 12 species including reformed Krathians, who had chosen honor over hatred. Together they responded to natural disasters, refugee crises, and regional conflicts that threatened to escalate. Kate had found purpose beyond vengeance, channeling grief for her sister into protecting others. She still mourned, still had nightmares, but the work gave meaning to survival. One mission took her team to a Krathian colony, devastated by an earthquake that killed 30,000. She worked alongside a Krathian officer named Korvac, who had fought at the Battle of Kratha. And they did not discuss the war while pulling survivors from collapsed buildings. After 3 weeks of exhausting rescue operations, Korvac told Kate that his people had been taught humans were weak, and the war had proven the opposite. But this work, saving lives regardless of species, this was strength too. Kate accepted the compliment and the implied apology, and she thought maybe her sister would have been proud of who she had become. Paul Henderson had become a political leader on his colony world of New Liberty. The farms thrived on land purchased with Krathian reparations, and his community included both human colonists and aliens seeking new starts. He maintained a strong militia because history had taught him that peace required strength, but he advocated for cooperation with alien neighbors. Young colonists sometimes asked about the war, and he told them truth without glory or shame, explaining that fighting had been necessary and victory had come from willingness to do terrible things. But every life lost was a failure of diplomacy that should be remembered. The Liberation Front had grown in secret for 5 years, building cells and stockpiling weapons and planning operations that would prove humanity was not invincible. Their attacks came simultaneously across 6 colony worlds, coordinated bombs that killed hundreds in marketplaces and transit stations. Ships were sabotaged in orbit, power stations destroyed, communication networks disrupted. The front broadcast a manifesto demanding Earth withdraw from galactic affairs or face endless guerrilla war. And the message was signed by the coordinator whose identity remained mysterious. General Raymond Carter, now Supreme Commander of Earth Forces, coordinated the response from Geneva. Intelligence traced the attacks to 17 different species, revealing the front was larger and better organized than anyone had suspected. This was not a terrorist group, but a genuine resistance movement, misguided but determined and supported by factions across the galaxy who resented human dominance. Carter assembled a task force combining military power with intelligence operations, but he gave orders that surprised his staff. Capture, don't kill. Undermine support, don't create martyrs. Win hearts and minds along with battles. Commodore Daniel Cross led the military component of the task force and struggled with orders that constrained his usual methods. He was accustomed to total war where enemy forces were destroyed without hesitation, but this conflict required precision and restraint that went against his instincts. Captain Kate Morrison embraced the new approach, seeing a chance to prove humanity could be more than efficient killers. The task force spent 6 months tracking front cells, arresting leaders, intercepting weapons shipments, all while minimizing casualties and documenting crimes for public disclosure. Intelligence traced front operations to a remote station in unclaimed space, and Captain Morrison led the assault team personally. They breached the facility expecting fanatics but found instead an elderly Vex named Shen, working at a computer terminal, calmly planning another wave of attacks. Morrison recognized him from intelligence briefings as the former council chair, who had disappeared after Earth withdrew from galactic politics. Shen looked at her without fear, and explained that he had created the Liberation Front because human military dominance would inevitably lead to tyranny, that he fought to prevent a future where Earth ruled the galaxy through force. Kate. Morrison looked at the old alien who genuinely believed himself a freedom fighter, and told him that he had killed innocents to stop tyranny that had not happened, that he had become the monster he feared humans would be. Shen had no response except to say that history always proved power corrupted, and Kate felt pity for him alongside anger because he was not evil, just wrong in ways that had cost hundreds of lives. They arrested him carefully, documented everything in the facility, and brought him to trial before a joint human-alien tribunal that broadcast proceedings across the galaxy. The trial lasted 3 months as prosecutors presented evidence, and Shen defended his actions with passionate speeches about resisting overwhelming power. The tribunal found him guilty of terrorism and mass murder, but acknowledged his political motivations, sentencing him to life imprisonment rather than execution. The message was deliberate. Humanity would not kill political enemies even when those enemies murdered civilians, because justice required proportionality and mercy, even toward those who showed none. The Liberation Front collapsed after Shen's arrest, its cells surrendering or disbanding once their leader was captured. The galaxy watched human restraint with surprise that slowly turned to grudging respect. Earth had demonstrated they could fight total war and also conduct precise operations, could destroy empires and also show mercy to defeated enemies. The dual capacity made them more rather than less frightening, because it meant human violence was controlled rather than reflexive, chosen rather than inevitable. The Galactic Council created a formal security framework with humanity as primary enforcement power, but with alien oversight committees. It was not the pure democracy aliens had enjoyed before or the human dominance some had feared, but rather a compromise between ideals and reality. Admiral Wade called it a working system that acknowledged humans were strongest but not omnipotent, respected but not trusted completely, necessary but not welcomed universally. The galaxy had learned to live with human power the way ancient humans had learned to live with fire, useful but dangerous, beneficial but requiring constant attention. Earth began sharing some military technology with trusted allies while keeping advanced systems classified. The goal was creating regional powers capable of maintaining their own security, reducing dependence on human intervention. Some species embraced this approach and built strong fleets. Others preferred relying on Earth's protection and paid for security through economic cooperation. Both systems worked, and the galaxy developed a balance where human military dominance was acknowledged but not absolute, respected but not resented beyond what any dominant power faces. Humanity's reputation evolved from feared conquerors to respected protectors, though the fear never entirely disappeared because the galaxy remembered what happened to the Krathians. Human peacekeepers responded to crises with efficiency and minimal casualties. Human traders dealt fairly, their word backed by military might that made breaking contracts suicidal. Human colonists lived alongside aliens in integrated communities that became models for cooperation between species with very different biologies and cultures. Admiral Christine Wade retired at 65. Confident the systems she built would endure, she returned to Luna and wrote memoirs examining